Hello and thanks for joining me. Well, today's going to be a boring video. We're going to bore this pulley out from 3/4 to 7/8. I got a friend that needs this pulley modified, and this pulley here's got a machine surface right here, which is going to make it easier to clamp. Normally I would do this in the lathe, but my lathe is not big enough to do this, so we're going to have to do it in the mill. So let's get started. Okay, there's various different ways to do this. Because this has a nice machine surface, I'll be able to clamp it right there fairly accurately. If it did not have that machine surface, I would have to remove my vise and clamp it to the table and make sure it was level. But because it has that nice machine surface, I'm going to use V-blocks in my vise. I've got a couple of spacers underneath the V-blocks to raise the V-blocks up so it sits on this machined edge right there and make things a little bit easier. Otherwise it would be sitting on the spokes. Anyway, it sits in there like that, and hopefully clamping that in there will be square, which I'm pretty sure it will be. Okay, a few minutes ago you saw me bend this piece of 3/8 rod. It's not critical by any means, but that's holding my indicator. They make something called a coaxial indicator, and the indicator is stationary while the spindle rotates to measure your bore, but they're kind of expensive and I don't have one, so this will work. To use this, now this has a keyway in it, and that's a problem, and not a big problem though. But locate that key so that it's facing about 2:30 on looking at a clock. You don't want it directly on your either your X or Y axis. Locate it like that. It'll just make it easier to indicate. And then you can kind of, if you don't lower it real low, you can see the edge of the hole there and know a little better when you're centered. Okay, I'm centered that way. Now this axis, I'm close to centered. It's not dead on. I'm sure they make these commercially, and they probably got a little thumb screw adjustment on them. Makes it a little easier to adjust this stylus where you're getting a reading. Okay, when I locked my table, it moved it a little bit, but it's back now. One little trick is have your table partially locked when you're making the adjustments. That way when you lock it down, it won't move on you. Okay, back in the keyway there. We're ready to bore that hole out. Here's an alternative way to center the pulley. It's a little bit, may not be as accurate, but it's probably plenty accurate for this pulley. If you have a piece of 3/4 inch bar and a 3/4 inch collet, this is a good double check. Problem is, this is cold roll, and it's got a little bit of run out. So, see the wobble? So, although that would probably be close enough for this pulley, it's prone to error. The indicator is probably a better way to do it. Okay, let's discuss this boring head. Supposedly, this adjustment right here says 1 division equals 0.001 inches or metric. I don't really know. I assume that's inches, but I don't really know that. Anyway, boring head has a sliding dovetail, and you put a boring bar in there, and you'll notice something about a boring bar. It's halfway through the radius, the height this way. This is the same as on a lathe, what you use on a lathe. And if you put it in the bottom hole, well, either one of the bottom 2 holes, depending on how large you want to bore your hole, I think it'll work in this one just fine. Anyway, it can't be like that. It has to be this way, or no, this way. So that when it rotates, the cutting edge is in the right angle to cut. Now, if I'm cutting like that, this cutting edge is cutting right there. But something kind of interesting, you can't put that right there. Or maybe you can. No. This is not the cutting edge of your boring bar. This is. And if you turn it over, that insert's not hanging out there. I should have made a double-sided insert. If you turn it over, then you've got to run your mill counterclockwise. Now this particular boring bar does not screw together, so you can do that. That's just something to be aware of. In the lower position you can go clockwise, and in the side position you have to go counterclockwise or get a different boring bar. They make a left and a right hand boring bar. Okay, if you've got a round column mill, when you raise and lower the head, you lose your horizontal reference. So, and I've got a round column mill. I've got a guide on there. I trust the guide. But I also made sure that I could fit that tool in there without moving anything. You could re-zero a DRO and put it back in the same place, but I would rather just leave enough room for the tool. That way everything stays dead on. Okay, I'm going to take a fairly small cut and move real slow on this because there's a keyway in there, and I don't want to, it's an interrupted cut. It could catch on there and be disastrous if I go too fast. This power down feed would be nice, but I don't have that on my mill. I'm going to leave the quill partially locked for accuracy. It makes the quill more stable. Now here goes. Well, I had a miscalculation here. You'll notice this boring bar is reduced. The shank of the boring bar is reduced right there. Well, I had this boring bar set where it would go all the way through the pulley, but it hit that flange right there at the last. You can see where it made a lip right there. So, I don't really like these brazed carbide boring bars, but they work all right. I'm going to replace that boring bar. I need to go 9 more thousandths, 9.5. 9.5 thousandths. I will go 9 and see what happens. Maybe even a little less. See what that does. About 6 thousandths under. I don't think this will get it, but I'm going to go one more time through there and see how much bigger it makes it. Now this, because of that length right there, this has got some spring to it, so it'll be bigger. I don't know how much bigger. About 2 thousandths under. If you've never used these things here before, which most of you may have, but you collapse them all the way, snug the handle right there, and then release it inside the hole. And then you put it at an angle and snug the end down again, which locks it. And then you go like that through the hole. Not several times, just one time. And I'm getting 1.5 to 2 now. It's a good idea to do that several times because it's always prone to a little error. Yeah, 2. So, I'm not going to move anything. I'm going to go through one more time. I don't really think it's going to be hard to make a 1,000th adjustment, but this will probably enlarge it some. I can actually see a ridge. See that little ridge in there? That's where it's making the hole larger. One over. I like it. I wish it was exactly 7/8, but I'm okay with 1 over. Down in the hole, I'm dead on. Or at least, I don't know if it was the depth of the hole or I'm calling it good. Okay, I've oriented the keyway that was in there toward me, parallel with one axis. And I made this thing right here a while back. I don't have a broach to cut a new keyway in there, so I made this. This is 3/16, which is the width of our keyway. And I cut a groove in a piece of 1/2 inch, split it in half. I got a little roll pin right there to stop that from traveling back. And that's what's going to cut our keyway. I got a little shim in there. Kind of crude, but it's going to work. You can only take about 1,000th at a time. Works a little better than a file. That spot in the middle is the set screw hole. I guess I could put a little oil on that. The 3/16 key needs to be .332 deep. But I'm going to go a little bit over. The key's got a set screw on top of it. Won't hurt a thing to be a little extra deep. Well, it's as deep as I can go anyway, because the curve of the hole is running into that shaft. But it's done. I like it. Take a look at the other side. Yeah, looks good. Well, I got the box all packed up and ready to send back to Tom. Hopefully it works out good. I think it will. Anyway, that about wraps it up. Thanks for joining me, and be sure and subscribe and ring that bell.